All right, welcome back to Cross the Line. We're going to shift now to more of a college football-based podcast when we're previewing this week's upcoming games.
Yep. Got a lot of good games on this slate. Last week was not very good. This week's pretty good slate, though.
I know. And yesterday, actually, we had some Thursday night football action. West Virginia and Virginia Tech, the battle for the Black Diamond. West Virginia looked pretty dominant.
Very dominant, 133-10, and in dominant fashion. Donaldson had over 100 yards rushing. JT Daniels played a solid game, but Virginia Tech really just couldn't get anything going offensively, and that was the story of the game.
Yeah, and I don't think that's on the coach for Virginia Tech, really. It's his first year there. He's adjusting to a new program. And I think this will sort of die down some of those, hey, let's fire Neil Brown. It's his fourth year. We're still bad sort of commentary.
For sure. Big win for West Virginia. No doubt about it.
Yeah, they've won 2 straight after falling to Kansas and Pittsburgh on the Thursday night. Yeah,
that was a really good game. West Virginia's a really good team.
Last week they had Townsend or something like that, so it wasn't really a great.
Blew out Townsend.
I think it was 65-7. I don't really know.
Right. I think it was 65-3.
But this week we have some good games. So I do want to start out on the 11 o'clock slate. The first one that really jumps out is Clemson at Wake Forest.
Clemson-Wake Forest is going to be a really good game. Clemson's a team that we don't really know too much about yet. They haven't really impressed anyone as of late. Hadn't really played anybody yet either. We'll see how DJ plays against a pretty good Wake team.
I think Wake might be a bit of a overhyped team a little bit. I think that defense really isn't there. That offense is there, but Wake's schedule, they're squeaking past games. Last week, they could have lost easily last week to Liberty at home.
Struggled with Liberty and didn't kind of struggle with Vandy. They took control of that game early, and it's kind of the story from there. But Vandy kind of almost found a way to come back, but it wasn't as a dominant performance as it could have been. But yeah, Wake's got a chance to make a stand for themselves, and so does Clemson. So it's a really big game for both teams.
So what are you thinking? Do you think?
I actually think Wake gets the job done at home. Clemson, I haven't seen enough from the Clemson offense to be able to pick them week in and week out, so I'm going to go Wake in on upset.
I don't like Clemson's offense. If it's Ugalele or Klubnik, I still think something's wrong. I don't know if that's at the OC level, or I don't think it is because Tony Elliott was there last year. He's the head coach of Virginia now, and then they still had problems. But yeah, I'll agree. I think Wake, just offensively, having Sam Hartman back, I think they do get the job done.
Definitely a different team with Sam Hartman. And if you just look back at Clemson, the teams that they've beat, they squeaked past Furman. It was 35-12, but if you watch the game, it was way closer than that. Furman competed with them all night. And then they beat La Tech 48-20, but it wasn't that close either.
Clemson's pulling away late in all these games.
They are.
It's fourth quarter.
Same thing with Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was hanging with them until the third quarter. So, Clemson. But that'll be the story of the game. If they can get up early on Wake Forest, maybe they'll get a chance. But pulling away late against Wake Forest on the road is going to be really tough.
Tough. The next game I do want to look at, and we can sort of do a 2-for-1 here, it's Baylor at Iowa State and then Missouri at Auburn.
That's 2 really, really good games, both big in the conference.
Yeah, I think Baylor at Iowa State's probably the 2 more elite teams.
No doubt. Missouri and Auburn are both struggling programs, I would say.
Right.
But I think the winner of that one could maybe get themselves right back on track.
Of Missouri-Auburn?
Missouri-Auburn. Now, Auburn, I think, is just
I'm going to be honest. I think we're seeing 2 teams who will have different head coaches next year.
That's very possible. I like Eli Drinkwitz. I think he walked into a difficult situation. I don't think he's doing as bad of a job as everybody's saying. Although,
I don't think he's doing bad of a job. I just think he's just sort of there. The recruiting was great. The recruiting might actually save his job, but I don't know. I think they will win this game. I think that Auburn team has just quit.
I think they did win too, and I think it's what's his name for Missouri, wide receiver, very good, biggest recruit that they've gotten in a really long time. He's been the story of that team.
Right.
I'm trying to think of his name.
But as you sort of look for that, Auburn, last week was a pitiful performance. It's just 41-12 versus Penn State.
Embarrassing.
And Penn State hasn't had an electric offense these past couple of years until really this year. And so, are they that good? I don't know.
In my opinion, Auburn got embarrassed last week. They went into the game. I think they hyped it up a little too much, going in feeling like they were going to win, and then Penn State showed them who was boss.
Well, it was a national TV game, and you go and you're watching the game and you see a whole section of recruits, an entire section of recruits for Auburn. And, I mean, it's that game sort of might be a momentum shift in this Harsin era. I know it was already going downhill, but this might be what gets, the train going off the tracks for good. But Baylor has one loss to BYU overtime game. And, I mean, I think Baylor's a good team, but they just haven't really impressed me.
I would agree.
Iowa State, I don't know really much about Iowa State. It's confusing. Iowa State put up 40 points against two low-level teams, and then against Iowa, they put up 10 points.
Iowa's a weird team. Iowa State's a weird team. But I do think Iowa State, at home, I like the advantage there for sure. Baylor has just not been impressive to me. I don't think BYU's as good of a team as we've hyped them up to be.
Iowa State is favored by 2.5.
They are favored. But I don't think BYU's as good of a team as we've hyped them up to be. So looking at that, I just don't think that Baylor really goes in here and dominates. I think it's going to be a really close game, but I do think Iowa State comes up with a win at home. I like them.
I'm going to disagree. I think Iowa State's defense I think their defense is actually pretty good. But I just think, I think Iowa State, there's too many questions there. I think they have had good quarterback play. Following up from Brock Purdy's not an easy thing to do.
Offensively, Deckers has had a really good year so far.
I just think Baylor has more talent.
I would agree. But I do think Iowa State at home prevails. I like Iowa State in that one.
All right, the next game we're going to look at, it's a rivalry game, actually, TCU at SMU.
Ooh, very interesting matchup. I think SMU is probably the best team in the American right now. If I had to say, I think that they are.
Yeah, definitely. I think they've been the most impressive. I think UCF, Memphis, Houston, and SMU are really that top tier, and then maybe ECU in that second tier.
On the road at Michigan last week for SMU, Maryland last week. Almost won. Very close game.
Yeah, I don't know how Maryland won that, actually.
I don't really either. It was a great game.
Because SMU outplayed Maryland the entire game. It's just Maryland had more points than them.
For sure. And then, obviously, TCU is good every year. We haven't really seen anything from them yet. They played two crap teams, Tarleton, and then Colorado is just not a very good football team.
Colorado's terrible. Colorado might be the worst Power 5 team.
And they won those in both blowout fashions. So this is really TCU's first test on the road at SMU. SMU, I think, will have a pretty good atmosphere, especially playing a Power 5 opponent and a rivalry game like TCU. So I like SMU in that one. They've been the most impressive so far, but really could go either way.
I like SMU. I think SMU's been tested more than TCU has by far. I like Max Duggan, though. He's a good quarterback, but give me SMU. This next game, this is a game you normally see, first game of the season basketball-wise. But they're really both 3-0. Should they both be ranked? Maybe. Duke at Kansas.
In my opinion, should have been game day. I think the storyline sets up perfectly. Kansas announced a sellout yesterday. So that's huge.
It's been their first sellout since 2009.
I think it's 2016.
Yeah.
But they've only had two since 2009.
That was the stat.
And the 2009 team, obviously, was the team that went on to win an Orange Bowl. I think it was an Orange Bowl.
Right.
Fiesta
Virginia Tech.
Had a great season. That's probably the best season in Kansas football history. And, I mean, they're on to do the same this year. Their schedule lines up to be pretty easy. Got a few tests, a few bumps in the road, but, I mean, Duke's undefeated, but to be honest with you, they haven't really played much. But they've been impressive so far. Shut out Temple 30-0 week 1, and then went on the road, beat Northwestern by a touchdown. Northwestern's not a very impressive team, but still a good win for Duke. And then they beat NC A&T last week by dominating fashion. This is going to be a really good game. I do like Kansas, though. I think Daniels, their quarterback, has been outstanding. And he's leading the team in rushing and passing. And he's really just been the story of that team. He's kind of led them to where they are right now. So I like Daniels and Kansas to win big over Duke.
I agree. Kansas is good.
Jalen
Daniels is electric. I mean, Houston's a good team. And Kansas goes on the road and beats them. I just like Kansas. I like Kansas big. Kansas defense, I think it's I don't think it's that good. But I like Kansas big. I like Kansas maybe 42 to maybe 20. I think Kansas scores big, a lot of points.
And I want to say one more thing about Kansas. Lance Leipold, I think. Lance Leipold?
Leipold, yeah.
Leipold. He has been absolutely fantastic, and if an SEC team is not looking for him, maybe as early as next year, I would be shocked because what he's done at Kansas is absolutely unbelievable. Completely shifted that program, and they're in a positive direction. They look really good right now. Kansas is a team to watch. And I don't know if they're like playoff good, obviously, but they're going to be very, very good. Bowl game, no doubt about it.
Yeah, Kansas is good. I mean, will Leopold be in Nebraska next year? Maybe.
Very possible.
But who knows? This next game, it's college game day. Probably the best ranked versus ranked matchup this weekend. Florida at Tennessee.
Big SEC game for both teams. Florida's been iffy. Obviously had a great win week 1 over Utah, upset win, and then lost at home to Kentucky. That wasn't a very great performance from them, and then almost got beat last week against South Florida on upset alert most of the game. And I think the story of that is Richardson has not been very impressive.
No, he hasn't.
He had a great game week 1, but since then he just hasn't done anything productive for them, which makes me think, I mean, they won't do it, but they got Jack Miller over there on the bench from Ohio State. I mean, could we see him in the following weeks? Possible, but I have not seen enough from Florida to be confident at all in them. And Tennessee's been nothing short of impressive so far. So I think Tennessee actually wins this one big.
Yeah, I think that Kentucky defense broke Richardson. And that I don't think Kentucky's defense is elite by any means, but
they do have a great defense, though. It's a really good defense.
Yeah. But I just think Richardson, made a couple mistakes in that Kentucky game, and that hurt his confidence a little bit, and he hasn't been the same since Utah. We can all agree by that. I like Tennessee, and I like them fairly big.
And another thing about Tennessee, Hendon Hooker's been fantastic. He has done nothing
That's a Heisman
bad,
sleeper.
for sure.
I mean, nothing bad. I mean,
no
the first thing when you say
interceptions.
Richardson's 4 interceptions for Hendon Hooker, it's 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
And then, if I'm right, I don't think Richardson has a passing touchdown all year, and he's got 4 interceptions.
I think he has. Well, I don't know. I think he has a 2-point.
He does have a 2-point conversion against Utah.
That's
that
the
doesn't
highlight.
count as a
That's his
touchdown.
hype highlight. Yeah,
That's the only play that we've seen from him that's been impressive all year, to be honest.
Right.
And I think the media, and not just the media, but mostly just the media, but the media's kind of overhyped him completely just because of that one play. And if you go watch them and watch all of their games, he's not very impressive.
And so the next game we want to look at this 2:30 slate, Texas at Texas Tech. I think it's going to be a good game. I like Texas Tech. I really do. I don't think they'll win the game. But, I mean, Texas Tech has been competing with a lot of good teams. I mean, you have Houston. They won by 3, actually. And then you have NC State, who I think is a really good team. They're there till the end. NC State runs away late.
So this is a really interesting one for me because Ewers could be back, potentially. Some people were saying he could be back this week. I think Hudson Card is just as good as Quinn Ewers right now. But that's a really interesting thing for me. Texas has been impressive, but Texas Tech has been impressive too. And Texas Tech at home, I mean, obviously like their chances. They lost last week to a really good NC State team. But I do think Texas goes in there and takes care of business. I just think that they're a really good football team. No matter who's playing quarterback, they're a good team. I think Robinson leads them in the run game, and they run for probably over 200 yards and get a pretty good win.
Yeah, the thing with Texas Tech is they don't really run the ball, and I don't know how well they can sustain that passing-only formula versus a Texas team with a defense that good.
For sure.
I just really don't think they can.
It'll be tough. A run game for Texas Tech will be crucial for them to even compete in that game.
I don't think there is any run game, really.
True.
And I think Texas is going to run all over them.
Robinson's really
I think
good.
it is going to be close. I think Texas Tech does play some inspired ball, but I think Texas is going to win. But the next game in this 2:30 slate, ACC versus ACC, sort of, if it's basketball, but it's football. Notre Dame at North Carolina.
I think North Carolina is going to win this one pretty easily. Notre Dame has been honestly embarrassing so far. They have done nothing that has impressed me. They shouldn't have won last week against California. They did find a way to win. Obviously lost week 2 to Marshall at home. It was a huge storyline. Embarrassing. And then what's crazy to me is they competed with Ohio State week 1, and since then they've just looked horrible. And they played terrible last week and still found a way to win. I don't even know who their quarterback's going to be this week. I think Butler's out for a year, so Pine. Last week Pine had, 170 yards. I think he had 3 touchdowns, and he had an interception. That's a solid game, to be honest, but I think North Carolina's been impressive too. They've been putting up points like crazy. Obviously put up 56 week 1 against Florida A&M and then 63 against App State. But then Georgia State last week, they had some bumps in the road, didn't play fantastic, but they did win. Oh, that was 2 weeks ago, actually. They're coming off a bye week.
Right.
So, but, I think North Carolina puts up a lot of points on the Notre Dame defense, but we'll see.
I think this is where the ship turns for Notre Dame. I think they get it right. I think they will win. Look, I know North Carolina's offense is elite and everything, but I just don't think that can hold up. I don't think they're playing great defenses. In fact, I think they are playing inferior defenses. You look at the schedule. Georgia State, not a good team. They lost to Charlotte, who's terrible. Appalachian State, look, we all know they're good this year, which I don't actually think they're good this year. But that defense is not good. They're losing to Troy late. And then I just really think that Notre Dame gets it done on the road. I think Drew Pine played a really good second half versus California. I think Cal, is Cal that good? No. Probably not. But I think Notre Dame just gets the ship turned around. I think Marcus Freeman is a good coach. He knows how to talk to them guys. And I think Notre Dame, gets an upset win in Chapel Hill.
I'm going to give Drake May and the North Carolina Tar Heels the win. Drake May's been fantastic.
North Carolina's only a 1.5-point favorite.
Which is nuts to me. But at the same time, I understand it. North Carolina hasn't – every game they've played has been kind of close besides week 1 against a crap opponent. And they didn't win that very big at all because kind of competed the whole time. But Drake May has been fantastic. And I think he prevails and they get the win.
Next game on the schedule, we go to the West Coast, Oregon at Washington State.
This one's really interesting.
Yeah.
Oregon had a good game last week, obviously. Blew out BYU. A lot of people had BYU winning the game.
Right.
And the story of that game was they just played great offensively. Bo Nix finally kind of figured it out. He was playing good, and then they ran the ball pretty well too. But, I don't know. I think week 1 we saw Oregon get manhandled by Georgia, and everyone was like, wow, Oregon's really bad. But now looking back at it, seeing what Georgia's done the past few weeks, I think we can say now that Georgia's just really, really good. Oregon's still a really good football team, and Bo Nix is a good quarterback, whether you want to say he is or not. But tough road test against Washington State, who's undefeated, and they've been okay. They got a good win over there at Wisconsin, but then barely beat Idaho, and then they did beat Colorado State pretty good.
Yeah, and last week that Washington State offense sort of started to click, but I think this offense is not good.
Yeah,
Cameron Ward transfer, followed his OC. I think he's good, but I just don't think they have the weapons. I think Oregon probably will run away with it.
I think they do.
I think they'll put up a lot of points. I'm not saying Washington State won't score. I think they will score. I think they'll compete a little better than BYU, but I think Oregon will still win.
I think Oregon gets the job done pretty handily.
This next game, we're going to Arlington, a game that probably really shouldn't be neutral, but it is. Arkansas and Texas A&M.
For me, this is the most interesting game of the week because we see an Arkansas team that was very impressive in the first 2 weeks, and then last week kind of had a mix-up with Missouri State where they just – they got outplayed, honestly, in the first half. Came away with a win 38-27. But the 2 weeks before, they beat Cincinnati and beat South Carolina pretty good. They won by, I think, 2 touchdowns in both of those games. And then, obviously, A&M has just been one of the weirdest teams we've seen. They're sitting at 2-1, but, they lost to Appalachian State, got upset week 2, and then barely beat Miami a week ago. But this one's really interesting. You got a team in Arkansas that's looking to prove that they're not a fraud, and then you've got a team in Texas A&M that I think is proven to not be a fraud too. So it's really a statement win for either team.
Yeah, and I think Arkansas last week was definitely a case of just looking ahead. I don't think they really prepared that much for Missouri State.
I would agree with that.
And I think they were more looking towards A&M. And I just, as much as I like A&M as how they played last week defensively, I just think Miami's offense is not all that's, said to be. A&M beat Miami 17-9 last week. I think Arkansas gets the job done. I think KJ Jefferson plays well. I think it's Hogs all the way.
Yeah, I also think Arkansas gets the job done. A&M's offense has just been so bad as of late. Max Johnson played last week, and he wasn't any better than Hayes King, in my opinion.
Right.
So I just think that Arkansas is just too much offense, and I think they win by about 20. I don't think A&M even keeps it close, despite the -2 for A&M.
Right. So SEC Saturday night, we have Vanderbilt, 3-1 Vanderbilt, traveling to Alabama.
Alabama's favored by 40.5. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Vanderbilt does cover this game. They've been very impressive as of the past 4 games or so. I mean, I can't tell you the last time Vanderbilt was 3-1 to start the season. Clark Lee's doing a great job.
I think he's doing a good job. Now, the quality of teams they've played, I don't think is very high. I mean, that Elon game was not very impressive.
Not at all. But they competed with a good Wake Forest team, and then they did go and beat the MAC champions at NIU last week.
Right.
Which was impressive to me. And then, obviously, week 1, they just destroyed Hawaii, but Hawaii's probably the worst team in
I'm going to contradict you. I think Alabama covers.
Okay. But you have to agree with me on the fact that Vanderbilt has been pretty impressive. Obviously, about as high as Vanderbilt can get is when James Franklin had them, where they were ranked. And,
right. I mean, he was a great coach at Vandy.
But I would say he's one of the best coaches to ever be at Vandy.
Right. I mean, Vandy was a powerhouse in 1920s.
And as of right now, Clark Lee is on track to get up there with James Franklin, I think. If he can get the recruiting figured out.
Do you think Derek Mason's up there?
I do think Derek Mason's up there. I mean, he kept him at mediocre, which is really what the best Vandy can do in the SEC. You know, they just can't compete with SEC teams. So them being mediocre, in my opinion, is pretty good.
Right. I think Alabama's just too much. I mean, it's just a talent thing. I think Alabama has a ton more talent.
No doubt about it. I mean, there's no doubt.
And spread-wise, I'm thinking Vanderbilt will put up 20, but Alabama might put up high 60s.
Very possible.
I'm thinking more of like a 65-20 final score. That's my official prediction.
I'm going to go with Vandy covering because Bryce Young comes out of the game in the third quarter. Vandy puts up a few points and finds a way to. I think they might lose by 39, but I got them covered.
Right. This next game, you know, it could have been a big game if we're talking like 5 years ago, but right now it's sort of like, Ohio State's going to run away with it. It's Wisconsin at Ohio State.
You know, Wisconsin came into the year being a pretty good team and then obviously lost to Washington State week 2 by surprise. And then they've only played 1 game since then, killing New Mexico State. But I think that Washington State loss was just a gloomy, gloomy loss for them. Makes their season just feel bad. I don't know why, but all the hopes are down with Wisconsin.
As a Wisconsin fan, you got to you see 38 points and 66 points. I would be freaking out seeing 14 points.
I mean, against Washington
your offense
State,
has been abysmal for years.
It's just embarrassing. I don't know.
I mean, I think Ohio State big. I think we could see 77 points from them.
For sure. C.J. Stroud.
They're really turning it on.
Can't bet against C.J. Stroud.
They're really turning it on. Poor Toledo.
But let's point out the fact that since Notre Dame, Ohio State has played 2 crap teams.
That's true. I
mean, they haven't had a real test because I don't think Notre Dame's a very good football team either, and they kind of struggle with Notre Dame. So we'll see. This is another big test for them, I think, before they.
I think Ohio State's going to run away with it. That's just my guess.
Division play, but yeah. I think Ohio State wins it pretty handily too, but still, pretty good game.
All right, the last game we want to preview real quick. Stanford at Washington. Stanford, historically a great team, in the 21st century. Washington really looks like they're good this year.
Yeah, they really do, and I think Washington wins this one pretty easily. They went and beat Michigan State last week at home, which was a huge win. They beat them pretty good. I mean, they beat them by 11, but it was a bigger win than that, and then they played 2 crap teams other than that and beat them pretty well as well. Washington's been impressive. I think Stanford's been okay, too. They beat Colgate week 1 and then played USC, which I think is probably the best team in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And they competed with them. So I think Stanford competes, but I do think Washington gets the job done.
Yeah, I think Washington gets the job done. I don't think – I mean, look, I think David Shaw's a great coach at Stanford, but I think he's coming towards his end. I think Stanford – I just don't think Stanford's that good this year. And it's hard. It's hard to recruit people that have to have a high enough academic resume to go to Stanford and also be athletically gifted. It's true. It's a disadvantage.
I mean, Christian McCaffrey is about all you can think of.
Yeah,
Andrew Luck,
It's a disadvantage. It's a disadvantage.
But
I think Washington wins, and I don't think they'll win big. I think it will actually be close, but I think Washington still wins at home. Now we want to go to the hometown team, Tulsa at Ole Miss. Ole Miss coming off a 42-0 win versus Georgia Tech, and I'm thinking, this is probably the best team we're going to play.
I agree. I think it's the best team that Ole Miss has played so far, and it's because Tulsa's offense is just so good. I mean,
right.
They're averaging about 520 yards per game offensively, and 400 of those is passing.
Right.
They got a really good quarterback, and they got a really good pass game. And it's going to be a real test for our defense because, to be honest with you, our defense has faced no pass game whatsoever. So
they really haven't.
So, and especially going into next week, a potentially top 15 matchup against Kentucky, I mean, this is a good
It's a
test,
good tune-up, yeah.
for sure. And I think it's going to be a tougher matchup than everyone thinks. I do think Ole Miss wins by about 20 or 30. But for me, what I want to see in this game is Jackson Dart. See if Jackson Dart's legit. I mean, obviously last week he played a better game. Had a bad interception, though. He had a really bad interception. Right. I want to see a clean game from Jackson Dart at quarterback. And I'll feel a lot better going into the Kentucky game.
Yeah. And the Rebs ran all over Georgia Tech. I assume we'll sort of not have a similar, but I'm sure the run game will still be prominent in this week's game. And Tulsa, looking at them defensively, besides their game versus Jacksonville State, which is an FCS program, not D1 yet, they're giving up a lot of points. I mean, to Wyoming, whose offense has not been elite all year, and to Northern Illinois, who, it has a better offense than Wyoming, but still 35 points in regulation. I don't know. I think the Rebs score a lot and score often. I'm not thinking on the level of Central Arkansas, not 59. But we might get that high 40s, low 50s.
I could see it, and I could see us putting up 60. I mean, if Wyoming can score 40 points on them, then we should be able to score just as many, if not more. I do think Tulsa puts up at least 20 because this is the first test our defense has seen. I think our defense is really good, but I think they struggle a little bit. But I think this one should be a pretty easy win for the Rebs.
Exactly. I think you're right. Tulsa, I think their offense is elite. But I think we're by far the best defense they've faced. And last week, I think the Rebs, hit the brakes for Georgia Tech. I think if we really wanted to, we probably could have put up 50, maybe 60 points. But
and Lane said that in his interview, that he kind of wanted to stop because he wanted to throw Luke in there and give him some snaps. But let's also talk about that. I mean, this is a quarterback competition that I think is over. I think Dart's won the job.
Yeah, and I think it's a little unfair to Luke. I mean, he did get injured, but that's just sometimes the way it goes.
It does stink for him, but I think when we went into this season, no matter what the media wants to say, no matter what Kiffin's going to say, he knew Jackson Dart was going to be the quarterback.
Right.
And I think that everything's working out the way it should because I think Dart's the better quarterback. Now, do I think it's safer option with Luke sometimes? For sure. But I think Dart's won the job. I don't think that we see much of Luke this week.
Right. And I think both quarterbacks can get it done on an elite level, but I think right now Dart is the answer.
I hope the best for Luke because I do think he should transfer, get out of there, and get a good job because he definitely can. Maybe Vandy.
Well, he could wait till senior year when Dart's gone, but
he could do that. But at the same
unlikely
time,
in today's college football world.
For sure.
All right, so the last question of the day: Iowa at Rutgers. The over/under is 33.5.
Oh wow. Okay. I'm gonna go under. I think Iowa scores 3 points, and
Iowa's favored by 8. And the over/under is 33.5.
Give me Rutgers 10-3.
10-3, okay.
10-3,
well,
Rutgers.
It's funny because if Iowa were to cover, that'd be almost half of the. That's 1/4. The spread is 1/4 of the over/under.
That's nuts.
That's unheard of. It's in Piscataway. Things can get crazy in Piscataway. I think the Scarlet Knights win. I think they win maybe 20-3.
Big Rutgers fan.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give them 10-3.
All right. Well, that's gonna be all from us on the Cross the Line podcast, and we'll see y'all next week.